Hey guys, it's time for Itty Bitty Bible Study. And this Itty Bitty Bible Study is for people that God has called into spaces that the church does not always understand. Daniel, the one that many of you know from the lion's den, actually has a much denser story. Daniel served Yahweh, but Daniel was called to Babylon. Babylon wasn't a covenant nation. It was a pagan empire filled with idol worship, false gods, political power, and a ton of practices that Daniel did not agree with. But Daniel didn't run from the palace. He actually served inside of it. Daniel 1:17 says that God gave Daniel knowledge, understanding, and the ability to interpret dreams and visions. And that gift wasn't only for church people. That gift brought Daniel before kings. Like when Proverbs 18:16 says that a man's gift will make room for him and bring him before great men. Daniel's gift placed him in rooms that his religion alone would not have opened up to him. He advised Nebuchadnezzar. He served under Belshazzar. He was actually elevated under King Darius. So governments changed, kings changed, but Daniel's assignment remained. And right in through here is where religious people start to get really, really uncomfortable because many times people do not understand an assignment that they were not themselves called to carry. See, just because you were not graced for a space does not mean that God has not called somebody else into it. Daniel learned the language and the literature of Babylon. He worked within the governmental system. He spoke with kings, counseled leaders, interpreted dreams. He solved their problems and even became a very high-ranking official. Daniel 2:48 says that the king promoted Daniel over the province of Babylon and made him chief over its wisest men. Daniel wasn't hiding in a prayer closet waiting for Babylon to become holy enough for him to participate. He was in the palace. Daniel was present, he was influential, but he was not compromised. And that's what made the distinction. Daniel could serve the king without serving the king's God. But from the outside looking in, you wouldn't know that. From the outside in, you would just judge that Daniel is in the palace with people that do not serve Yahweh, that Daniel is living and doing all the things with people that do not serve Yahweh. Why? Because you're from the outside trying to look inside to something that you weren't called to. When the food would violate his convictions, he wouldn't eat it. When Daniel was told to stop praying, he kept praying. When the culture demanded worship, Daniel would not bow. He knew how to participate without being possessed by the system. He knew how to serve the king without ever surrendering to the king's God. He knew how to remain respectful and not become assimilated religiously. And so that brings me to this thought. Some of us need to understand that separation and isolation are not the same thing. Jesus said in Matthew 5:14, "You are the light of the world." And guess what? Light is only noticeable when it enters dark spaces. Biblical holiness was never meant to make us socially useless. God can, will, and does place believers in government, education, business, entertainment, medicine, law, technology, fashion, anything else you can think of. As a matter of fact, every other space where people are not going to attend your church service, are not going to watch your live stream, and are not coming to your conferences. They may never hear a sermon, but they will encounter your integrity. They will benefit from the gift that God has placed on the inside of you. And through that gift, they will come face to face with the God that you serve. Nebuchadnezzar didn't call Daniel because he wanted a Bible study. He called him because he wanted an answer. And when Daniel gave him that answer, Daniel made sure that the king knew exactly where that answer had come from. Daniel 2:28 says, "There is a God that reveals mysteries." So Daniel didn't enter rooms preaching where people had not asked him to preach. He entered rooms using the gift that God had given him to bring answers to people. And when the opportunity presented itself, he gave God the glory. And newsflash, that is ministry too. Everything will not happen behind a pulpit. Everything will not happen within the confines of a church or denominational structure. Some assignments wear suits. Some assignments sit in boardrooms. Some assignments work on movie sets. Some assignments happen in music studios and on stages. Negotiate contracts and advise people whose belief systems are totally different than what theirs is. So hear me, don't allow people that were never called to your assignment to make you feel guilty about being in the rooms that God has opened the doors for. Because the real question should never be, are there ungodly people in the room? The real question should be, can you remain faithful to God while you're in the room? Because Daniel did. Daniel advised and did his job. Daniel ate with, served with, talked with, laughed with, lived with people who did not serve his God, but Daniel never bowed. And eventually, the king that did not serve Daniel's God had to acknowledge the Spirit of God that was on the inside of Daniel. So when religious people try to put this yoke of legalism around your neck about you can't do this and you can't do that, if it doesn't line up with Scripture, it holds no weight. And Scripture shows us over and over again that God has a track record of setting his people in difficult systems to accomplish divine purpose. So no, everybody is not called to disconnect from secular spaces. Some people are called directly into them. And not to become like culture and not to bow to culture, but to bring light into dark places, to carry his wisdom, his presence, his power, and his excellence into spaces where people are that may never come to your church. You may actually be the Daniel in the palace. So stop apologizing for the fact that God has given you the grace to stand in a space to do what everybody can't do.